welcome to MASHmouth, a podcast covering every single episode of the hit 1970s sitcom, MASH. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Vanessa.
Vanessa, you want to scream is what I'm hearing.
Yes, Sorry. I had my notes backwards and upside down just now, and I was just like, what are we talking about in our intro? And I'm just like, I'm discombobulated because I don't want to talk about this episode at all.
Great start. Really reeling them in.
I'm legitimately so sick of this episode, and I told you this before, but I'll tell our listeners too. I have seen this episode now 3 times in the last 7 days. I'm so irritated.
Why did you watch it 3 times?
Okay. So, on MeTV, what is it called? My Entertainment Television, or
is that
something
what
like
it's
that?
Called? I just thought it was MeTV.
Something like that. I don't know. But MeTV shows it's like a local station, and it shows all of the old sitcoms and stuff. It's just like, it's basically my bread and butter. And they show MASH, and so they started over on the series, because when they get to the end, they just start it back over. And they played this episode, so I kind of like casually watched this episode, and then it happened to be the next episode, so like 2 days later, or the next episode that we recorded. So 2 days later, I had to watch this, and then we didn't end up recording on the day that we were supposed to record, so now I have watched it 3 times to take notes on it, and I'm over it. I'm over this episode. I don't even like it that much.
Yeah, I mean, I've only watched this 1.5 times, and I don't outright, like, dislike or hate this episode, but, yeah, 1 watch was enough. I was like, yeah, I get it. I understand what's going on here. MeTV is great, though. I don't watch it as much as you, I think, but they have, I think, every Saturday night, the show Spengali, or Spenguli, whatever, where it's kind of like do you know what Elvira is? It was like a show hosted by, like, a character where they're showing, like, an old weird horror movie, and it's like the MeTV version of that, and it's really fun. Like, they showed the Munsters movie the other week.
Oh my gosh.
And I watched some of that with my mom, and it's very low budget. It's literally, I don't know if it's literally a guy in his basement or whatever in face paint doing it, but like that's the aesthetic that they have, and that's mainly what I watch on MeTV, because I'm a weirdo who likes old weird horror movies that aren't actually scary.
I love MeTV. Not gonna lie, I watch it all the time, and anytime I have free time, I'm just like, what's on MeTV today? And
I hear you're also watching Three's Company on there. Am I wrong in that?
Yeah, you are wrong on that, actually. I was watching Three's Company on the Independent Film Channel. I think it's called
IFC.
Literally, yeah, that.
IFC. Great channel also. They have a bunch of, like, weird stuff, or they did.
Legitimately wonderful. Yeah, sorry, continue.
IFC is great. They have a bunch of weird stuff on that channel. They had the Comedy Bang Bang show, which I thought was very good.
Yeah.
And they also showed a bunch of movies unedited.
I love when cable shows the actual movie, even if there's commercials in it, when they show, like, the not cut for TV movies. Wonderful. Couldn't ask for better. Yes, there are streaming services, but I love TV movies that I legitimately enjoy some movies that have commercials in them.
Some movies play better with commercials.
Yeah, I agree.
I can't name an example right now, but there are several movies where I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen this without commercials.
There's so many. I can't, like you said, I can't think of any right now, but it's true. I enjoy commercials. It's like the weirdest thing, but whatever.
The one time we watched Avengers Endgame on TBS with commercials, and that movie was like 6 hours long, and we watched the whole thing on TV. On TBS, and we were like, we could put this on any time, like, without commercials, but we just powered through.
I love that. Like, what did we watch? And this is kind of going the opposite, but my mom and I watched Knives Out with commercials.
Yo.
That was the worst movie ever to watch with commercials. Yes, and I'm pretty sure it was on TBS as well. I love the movie too. Like, I legitimately really enjoy that movie, but the flow of it completely broken with commercials.
Yeah,
and my
I can
mom
see
was like,
that.
this is weird. I was like, don't worry. It's like better if you're not watching it with commercials. Sorry.
You watch it as intended.
Sorry, like this is your first exposure to it, but you know, it is what it is.
And now let's talk about this episode. This episode is called Ringbanger, where Hawkeye and Trapper treat Colonel Brighton, who is a little too battle eager. In order to prevent him from causing more casualties, Hawk and Trap try to keep the guy off the battlefield by playing mind games and convincing him that they're the only ones in the 4077 that they can trust. Vanessa, I know that you've seen this one a lot, and maybe that tampered your opinion on it, but what did you think of this episode?
Honestly, rewatching it this last time to talk about it, I thought it was better than I thought it was in the past 2 times I watched it, because I thought that the writing was actually really well done in this episode. The plot itself is like, I wasn't too interested in it, but I don't know, we'll get into it more, but just the writing of the plot of them kind of playing mind games on this guy and how it all kind of culminates and together is, I don't know, I thought it was really well done. What about you?
I don't dislike this one at all, and I know what you're gonna bring up later on being like a particularly dated aspect, but in context, like, I don't think there was even anything like super offensive or like borderline in this episode, because it's all like in context of being in a military base in the 50s. But otherwise, I was just like, this one's just kind of there. Like, it's just kind of an episode of MASH. The most interesting thing about it to me was the guest star, which we should mention. I know we have this in our trivia section, but we should bring it up sooner. That Colonel Brighton is played by Leslie Nielsen. And the entire time, I was like, is that Leslie Nielsen? I don't know. Like, I don't really know what he looks like, but I've seen Airplane, a couple times. Is that him? And then the end credits, it was like, that's him! Oh my god! What do you think of Leslie Nielsen in this?
Well, I thought he was actually really good in it. When I watched it the first couple of times, I was like, who is that guy? Why do I know him? What, he looks so familiar. And then I was like, okay, it's Leslie Nielsen. That makes sense why I would know him. But I thought that his performance was actually so good in it, and we'll get to it later in our trivia section about him, but he's so funny, and I thought it was really well done. His character and who he was playing and just the whole thing.
It's very interesting to see him kind of pre the parody movies like Airplane and Naked Gun that like made him famous to a lot of people, playing more of a straight character in a comedy situation, but not necessarily being like this over-the-top weirdo wacky guy that he goes on to play. He's more of like a handsome military guy, just kind of unironically. And yeah, it was pretty interesting. That was what stuck out to me the most, was the guest star. Everything else was just kind of okay.
So the opening scene actually kind of really shocked me a little bit, because they're operating on Brighton and they start making jokes and stuff like that. And there was a laugh track in the back and they were in the OR. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's a laugh track in the OR. That's like not, I mean,
that's rule breaking.
It's supposed to be more like a post-op situation. They're not all convened operating together, but I was still kind of like shocked.
Yeah, if you're used to, I didn't notice that because you're more used to the rhythms of the show than I am.
Yeah.
So I'm sure like you were like, that's not how that's supposed to work.
Yes.
But I didn't even realize that. That's very interesting, and I love that you caught that. Yeah, this first scene was just very simple. They were like operating on his thigh and like taking out a bullet. And he's kind of this like tough military, like, don't worry about me, like, sweetheart, like, kind of very confident, uses that as like a charm and charisma. And this starts with like Hawkeye and Trapper kind of being on his side, like kind of liking him, but then they take him to the swamp and they quickly lose that goodwill towards him as they kind of learn of what he's been responsible for as a commanding officer.
Yeah, like his toxic masculinity kind of shows after Hawkeye and Trapper take him to the swamp for a drink. Because he seems like this really like charismatic guy. He's pretty cool, you know, whatever. So when he's talking with Hawkeye and Trapper, that like toxicity kind of comes out, and they quickly are like, ew, I don't like this guy. On the lines of like sorry, I keep using this term, but like the toxic masculinity aspect of it. He like won't use his cane even though he just had surgery on his leg. He calls battle fatigue like being chicken, and I kind of liked how Hawkeye and Trapper called him out on that almost immediately. They said, did Freud ever mention chicken or something like that? And kind of pushing back on this idea that, you know, fighting in a war is not going to affect you mentally in any type of way.
They recognize immediately that, like, he's not a good commanding officer. He doesn't think that casualties are a real problem. He's very just goal-oriented. And he's very, like, high and mighty about it. Like, Trapper says, like, once he leaves the tent, oh, I wonder if he'll stand so tall if he wasn't standing atop all these dead bodies. Like, a very kind of hardcore line said very casually, excuse me. That's a Freudian slip to tie into our Freud conversation.
Oh my god, Ethan. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and again, along those same lines, he uses this anti-Korean, like anti-Asian slur very casually, and that's like, wow, you're kind of an asshole for that. And this scene is where you kind of get the driving force behind the episode, I would say, because, like you said, Hawkeye and Trapper mentioned that he has a lot of casualties, and every time they see this guy, there are several more casualties than normal for, you know, operating. And this is where you get the title of the episode as well, because when Hawkeye and Trapper are talking to him like, hey, maybe you should take it easy because you just had surgery. Hey, can you stop killing people? He starts to like bang his ring against the table, and that's kind of like the sorry.
He bangs his ring on the table while they're telling him like, hey, can we not cause casualties or excessive casualties the way you've been doing? And he's like, no, like, not directly saying, but like, come on, you're being too sensitive. You're not doing it well. And Hawkeye comments like, oh, see, the guy's a ringbanger. He thinks that he's the quarterback and we're just the water boys in the Super Bowl of the war. Like, he thinks the war as a game, more or less. So they're like, we have to take him out of commission because he is just not a good influence on the whole thing right now.
Yeah, so when I was looking up this episode, I came across the term ring knocker, which I think is supposed to be kind of what they're going for there. And so as I was doing a little bit of research on what that term meant, I found that ring that he was wearing is a class ring for a military academy. They mention it in, I'm pretty sure, the next scene, that he went to West Point, which is this really elite military school. And the term ring knocker is actually used in the military to describe these type of guys who are like Brighton, who went to these elite military schools and then now kind of like think they're better than other people who went to not as elite military academies for training and whatnot. And I really thought that kind of spoke to the show's overall tone against militarism. And again, not necessarily being like anti-military, but like being anti-militarism, but did it in a more subtle way with this character, because obviously he is banging this class ring that's known for being like elitism and stuff like that. And this character in general is more preoccupied with fighting a war, but not really caring why they're fighting a war, and doesn't really care that he's expending all of these lives and stuff like that. And I thought that was, again, it was a little bit more subtle, I think, than we've seen in the past of this show's critiques of the army and war and stuff like that. And I just really liked it. I thought that was really interesting too, with like the ring banging thing. It was very on the nose of like ring and knocking.
Well, if that's like a legitimate term, which I didn't know before you mentioned that, that is very well constructed then. Again, I just saw it as like a Super Bowl thing, because they talk about it like it's football, and he views the war like a game he's playing, like they're not real people involved. It's just, I want to win, let me win, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to win. And, that's not necessarily the approach that you should go with when you're in an actual life and death situation. So that's cool that this has that commentary in it. Not that I didn't recognize it, but knowing that like the Ringbanger thing is a thing, it's more clear commentary than I thought it was.
I just really liked that it was kind of poking at this idea of intermilitary conflict, like these guys who are, like if you're not in the military, you're not necessarily like, you don't necessarily know that term. And it's kind of just, I thought it was just interesting how it was like, these guys in the military don't like these guys in the military for, all of these reasons. I don't know. I liked it.
Yeah.
So then, of course, because Hawkeye and Trapper are who they are, right? They're like, we have to get this guy out of here. This is too much. He's causing people to die. So they have Radar run like Oppo research on him, essentially. And they find out that, again, he was from West Point, which is one of the, elite military academies. So it's kind of, they shoved it in there a little bit more. And he was in perfect health. He's never taken sick time, this, that, and the other thing. But they also found out...
This guy's gonna be healthy 2 years after he's dead.
Yeah, that's how Hawkeye describes him, because he's in such good shape. But they also mention that he's had twice as many casualties as any kind of like commanding officer on the front, with covering half as much ground. So he really is just kind of battle hungry and wants violence and war and doesn't care about the human impact. And it's like, okay, that's not good.
And with that battle hungriness, I like how they characterize him again, because he's never malicious. They don't say like, oh, he's evil or whatever. He doesn't do anything bad, really, other than use a racial slur, which again is in context of a white guy in the 50s, but he's still like just a kind of normal, charming guy. Like, they don't present him as like, oh, check out this bad guy that we have to take down. It's just like, this charming guy isn't behaving well, so let's get him out of here.
Yeah, I think that they kind of, not that they played it down, but they definitely didn't play it up that he was, causing massive death. What's interesting, though, to me with this storyline where they're trying to kind of keep this guy out of battle in any way that they can, is that you see this kind of a lot throughout the show. There are definitely episodes further on when Trapper is gone. Basically, we have a whole new cast with like several episodes of this kind of exact storyline of Hawkeye trying to get this battle-hungry commanding officer off, like, out of the war. So it was pretty interesting to see that, like, this first one.
Good beta episode, something we'll iterate on several times in the future.
So we should get into kind of their plot to get him out of the war entirely, or at least off the battlefield for a while. So do you want to kind of explain what they were doing?
Well, they gaslight him. They make him question his reality. Like, that's what they do. They make him question his entire perception of reality by doing these like little things that just make him be like, oh, I'm not well. Because his whole thing is like, oh, I feel fine, I feel perfect. And he is perfect. Like, he's in perfect health. But they keep manufacturing these scenarios to make him question whether or not he's losing his mind. Like, moving his tent, having Radar put in a glass of milk in the tent and saying that it's been there for hours and that he really wanted, like, yeah, they gaslight him and make him question his sanity. That's their method.
They wage psychological warfare against him in a very similar way that they would, like, Frank. If they were trying to pull something on Frank, you know?
But, like, worse.
Yeah, I think that it was a little bit more overstated. Not overstated, but,
For people listening, Vanessa just keeps opening and closing her hands like an explosion, like jazz hands. She keeps jazz handsing, which doesn't play well to audio.
Yeah. It's just a lot more than what they would do to Frank, I feel.
Pow.
So this is where I thought that the writing was actually really well done. They make him believe that he is starting to have, like, battle fatigue and that there could be something, you know, wrong with his leg and stuff like that. But they do it in a way that's like, you have to believe us because everyone else in the camp is crazy.
Gaslighting.
You can't trust anyone else but us. It's like, that's insidious. But,
It's insidious for a good cause.
Yes.
As is usually the MO.
That's true. They do it in a really good way where they say, you know, oh, you can't trust Henry because Henry's this drunk. They kind of suggest that Frank is gay, so you don't want Frank to touch you because, again, the toxicity of
Gay
that era.
panic.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll get into that a bit more.
Yeah. And, you know, you can't go near Margaret because she's Henry's girlfriend and he'll get really angry, so she can't examine you either. So it's all this kind of ploy to convince Brighton that the only people who are legitimate are Hawkeye and Trapper, and don't go for a second opinion because you'll get the drunk or the gay.
The drunk or the gay. The two evils.
Yeah, right? So it's hard to discuss if you're not watching it, but I thought that the writing was just really well of how everything kind of came together, that they were sowing these seeds and stuff like that with, there's a scene a little bit later on after they tell Brighton that Frank is, you know, gay.
In so many words. They're like, oh, he dresses like a woman or whatever. And again, whenever they bring up people dressing like women, I'm always like, but Klinger, though. Klinger's like, nobody cares about him. But whenever they bring it up in these early episodes, it's like, oh my god, how could anyone do that? Are they a deviant? And then later on, like, there's a man in a dress every episode, and nobody cares, like, at all.
Yeah, everyone just kind of treats it as normal. Or the people who don't treat it as normal are just like, wow, that was weird.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll kind of get into it. Like, this scene, I didn't particularly like it. I understood the context of it, and that it was the 1970s, so being gay was kind of...
You gotta roll back to the 1950s. Gay people were legit more or less banned from the military.
But I was more talking about how in the 1970s you have this cultural change where it was still the early-ish 70s. This is when gay rights kind of just was beginning to gain some traction, and I think we had mentioned in a previous episode, like, this is kind of when women's rights started to gain some more traction in, like, the 60s, 70s era. And the TV show itself just kind of, like, hadn't caught up yet. And I believe up until, like, recently, this kind of idea of gay panic was, you know, played for laughs. And we're just kind of now being like, okay, well, this is not funny. So, yeah, it just, like, It wasn't funny in a modern context. I'm sure it was funny at the time, maybe, but, like, I didn't think it was funny. So after this whole scene with Frank where Brighton, like, won't let Frank examine him because he thinks he's gay, and God forbid, like, a gay person touch you, I guess, Hawkeye and Trapper and Margaret are all in the swamp, and Margaret says, why are you not letting Brighton leave? He's completely fine. I'm a nurse. I know I know that he's okay. And so they convince Margaret that he has no self-esteem and that as a man, he's just, like...
shot.
Yeah. And I thought it was really funny how easy it was to convince Margaret that this, like, big strapping military guy was really vulnerable at the moment, and she was like, oh no. And I just, her reaction to it was, like, so funny.
Into him. Okay, so we are 37 minutes in this episode and we've talked about 2 scenes.
Okay.
But they established that she's, like, already into him. So having them mention, like, oh, well, he needs a self-esteem boost, like, she didn't need much convincing to go and try and go after him.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. Like you said, in the OR, they made a joke that she was kind of, like, drooling over him, and I thought that was really funny.
People are liable to trip over your tongue.
That was so funny. So after they kind of plant the seed to Margaret that this guy needs some kind of, like, self-esteem boost, knowing that she'll probably be the one to do it.
Try to sleep with him, more or less.
Yeah. So there's this scene with Frank and Hawkeye in the showers, and Hawkeye makes like a mention that Margaret was, getting ready for a date or something like that, and Frank was like, we don't have a date. Like, what are you talking about? And that kind of sets in motion Frank's jealousy. Like, they plant the seed that Margaret is going to go on a date with Brighton, and Frank is like, oh no, what's gonna, like, I don't want this. He starts getting jealous.
He works himself into a lather, and he literally has a bunch of lather on him.
Okay, can I just mention that Frank washed his body and washed his hair with the same soap, and I was like, that's gross.
Welcome to being a guy in the military, my man. You don't have a lot. You're not exactly looking to be all suave, You're just like, I gotta get clean.
That's disgusting. I hate it. But
oh my god, can we talk about something that's disgusting? Is that he goes over to Margaret before she goes out and tries to hang out with Colonel Brighton. Like, he goes over and kind of, like, panics about their relationship, and he starts just smelling her hair for, like, 2 minutes, and I know they're in a relationship, so in theory, it's better than they would, like, if they're not, but I'm like, hey, don't sniff people's hair. That's, like, gross and, like, weird, and don't do that. It's not, like, a comfortable thing to do. It made me uncomfortable.
Yeah, even Margaret was like, Frank, don't sniff. It's like, because it was very, like, it was kind of strange how he wasn't like, oh, you smell nice. He was just like a straight up dog sniffing her.
Straight up, like, in her head. Like, just next. It was bad. I don't like seeing this.
What did she say? Because Frank was, like you said, was kind of in a tizzy about their relationship, thinking that she was gonna, I guess, like, cheat on him with Brighton, which was her intention, I guess. And she says something along the lines of, well, you can't just come in here dripping and sniffing, because he had just come from the shower. Oh my god. That scene was so funny to me. So after that whole thing with Frank and Margaret, Hawkeye and Trapper are talking to Brighton, and they say that Margaret was Henry's girlfriend, and, she's gonna come in and she's gonna, like, try to touch you, but don't touch her because she's Henry's. And gross, okay, yeah, we know. Which is a lie, because they had planted the seed to Margaret that she should go in and try to, like, have sex with him. So then Hawkeye goes to Henry and says, oh, Henry, can I keep this bottle in your desk? Because I can't keep it in the swamp, this bottle of alcohol. And Henry's like, oh, yeah, sure. So then they start drinking. And if you remember, Hawkeye and Trapper told Brighton that Henry was this drunk. So they had to get Henry drunk.
They get him drunk, and they convince him that he has to go out to, like, a shooting range to, like, win. I didn't quite understand this. If he shoots targets, he wins $350 out of, like, a shooting proficiency thing. And he gets wasted, like, blackout drunk, more or less. And they, like, take him to the tent where everything comes together. It's the whole house of cards collapsing in on itself, where it's like, Frank's there, Margaret's there, drunk Henry's there. And, like, they're making Brighton be like, this place is insane, I need to leave, like, I'm losing my mind. Henry waves a gun around, drunk out of his mind, and I was just like, I hope that's not loaded, because that's very dangerous.
So just to back up a little bit, they knew that Margaret was going to go to Brighton's tent, and they knew that Frank was going to, maybe, like, follow her or whatever the case was, or, like, try to examine Brighton again. Then you have Margaret, Frank, Brighton in the same tent, and then they grab Henry, and they're like, okay, Henry, time to go. Really, really drunk Henry. And oh my gosh. And so because they had said to Brighton before that Margaret was his girlfriend, Henry drunk and pointing the gun, they're like, oh no, Henry, don't shoot Brighton because you're jealous and stuff like that. And like you said, Brighton's just like, I have to get out of here. This is crazy. So
this is insane.
Yeah, they have Henry sign papers because they had an ambulance come right away. And they had Henry sign papers to send Brighton back stateside. So this whole crazy, ridiculous plot worked in the end.
Yeah. They make Brighton question his sanity. They set up the whole game to have it all like Ocean's 11 style, where like low stakes Ocean's 11, where everything works out in the end, and then that's the end. And the episode is perfectly fine.
Well, I wouldn't say perfectly fine. That's the end of the episode. We actually got another laughing OR scene where at the very end, Hawkeye, or what is it? So Hank, who the fuck is Hank? Okay, yeah, you know what? I'm done with this episode. I'm over it. Just know that there's another scene in the OR where there's a laugh track, and I was just surprised. That's the most interesting part of this episode to me. But yeah, I liked that this kind of was well written enough to have all these like really tiny moving parts and have them all crash into each other. Yeah, I liked it a lot. I mean, again, I had my problems with this episode, but I thought that it was written really well.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with you. It's just that it's not incredibly funny. Like, if it was just a laugh a minute or, you know, whatever, it would be a much better episode. Mm-hmm. But it was just kind of fine. It was just like a kind of fine episode.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Leslie Nielsen. Obviously, he's more well known these days for being in Airplane and Naked Gun. Did you have any familiarity with him? Like, have you seen Airplane? Are you a fan of those 70s parody movies?
Yes. So I actually watched Airplane for the first time probably around the same time I started watching MASH, which again, too young for Airplane probably, but very funny regardless. I think that's another movie that's funny, but it's very dated. Like, so it's a lot. That movie is a lot, but it's fun.
I respect Airplane more than I like it. It's one of those situations where I fully recognize that what they're doing is kind of incredible. Like, there's a joke every second of that movie. Yeah. Like, it is relentless. It is nonstop. You could watch that 500 times and, like, notice new things. It's, like, an incredible piece of filmmaking for this very dumb movie. But yeah. I don't find it to be, like, incredibly funny. Like you said, it is dated. And it's just more, like, kind of the 70s vibe. But, like, even if, like, 10 jokes don't land for you in the space of a minute, there's gonna be, like, another one that's, like, pretty good right after that. So, like, even if the hit rate isn't 10 out of 10 perfect, it's still, like, an incredible movie to watch where you're like, how did they even think of all these things to do?
Yeah, I think that, because so my mother and my grandmother really loved this movie. It was like,
of course,
it's their favorite movie. I remember it was one of those first, like, oh, this is adult humor. I'm watching adult humor. And so maybe that's why I thought it was really funny. I haven't seen it in years, but yeah.
And Leslie Nielsen is very good in it because Leslie Nielsen was a very serious actor before transitioning into these wacky comedy movies, and you have a bit of background on him. Let's hear about it.
So he was born in Canada. He's a Canadian actor, and he actually served in World War II, which I thought was very interesting. He has had a very prolific career acting-wise, and he did serious, he did comedy, he did the stage, he did documentaries for the Discovery Channel, nice. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so he did a lot. And what I thought was most interesting about him, or like one of the most interesting things, I just didn't know this, was that he was actually legally deaf. And he wore hearing aids for most of his life.
Oh, really?
So I thought that was really cool. Yeah, I had absolutely no idea.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I love that, honestly. I love whenever anybody works with their disability, you know?
Yeah, I thought that was really, really interesting. Because, I don't know, like, I guess you just, like, kind of wouldn't know it if you didn't know.
I want to see more of his dramatic stuff, too. I want to watch, like, an old Leslie Nielsen drama so I could see him completely in a different mode.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I always really like to see comedy actors in more serious roles, or even serious actors in comedy roles.
Yeah, because he was a serious actor. Like, that was the whole bit, that they got, like, this prestigious guy to say this, like, really ridiculous lines, but, like, be very stoic about it. That was their whole bit about him, and it, like, worked really well. So, Vanessa, you're over this episode.
I'm over it. I'm glad that this one's done, but the next one I'm actually really excited to talk about, and I'm really excited for you to see it.
Oh, yeah. Like we've mentioned, whenever there's like a meh episode, a good one usually follows it, and oh boy, that continues to be true. So just to wrap up, we'd like to give thanks to Jacob Fierbalco for being our technical consultant, Vanessa's sister Melissa for our awesome cover art, our music and social media are linked in the description, and lastly, we'd like to thank you, our listeners. And until next time, actually shampoo when you wash your hair. Goodbye, farewell, and amen.
Goodbye, everyone.